Good morning. Today we're going to continue talking about rational expressions and equations, and we are going to focus on target 4.3, which is add and subtract rational expressions. If you think back to adding and subtracting fractions, you need to make sure you have common denominators before you can do that. So, to get you there, difference between add, subtract, and the rest of the stuff that we've done so far is that you only factor the denominators to start. You could factor the numerators, but you end up having to undo that eventually anyway, so just save yourself some time. So when you're adding or subtracting, you're going to factor all denominators. You're going to identify the restrictions. You're going to find the common denominator and multiply each fraction by the missing pieces. We'll talk about that in a second. And then you'll simplify the numerators by distributing and or combining like terms. And then the denominators stay the same. So it's really important that you think back to possibly that time when you started to dislike math the most, when you were doing fractions in elementary and middle school. The rules for adding and subtracting fractions are different than the rules for multiplying and dividing fractions. Add, subtract, you have to have common denominators, and then the denominators stay the same. For multiply and divide, you do not have to have them, and you actually will change them. Okay, so let's go through this. Okay, for the first four, you will notice that our denominators are already the same. We're still going to factor if we can so that we can find our restrictions, but if we don't have anything to factor, we're going to do our restrictions and go from there. So notice for A, I cannot factor x plus 2, so to find my restrictions, I'm going to do x plus 2 equals 0. And it's the same for both, so I really only have to do it once. So x cannot equal negative 2. Okay, so there's my restriction. Now, for adding and subtracting, what we're going to do is we're going to keep that same denominator, and we are going to combine like terms. So notice I have a 1x here plus a 2x there, so 1x plus 2x gives me 3x. I also have a negative 2 plus 3. So negative 2 plus 3 is positive 1. So my answer, since I can't factor this any further, is 3x plus 1 over x plus 2. My restriction is x cannot equal 2. X cannot equal negative 2. Okay. For B, again, I can't factor either of these. They're both the same already. So I'm going to go ahead and find my restriction. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So my restriction is that x cannot be 4. Okay, and again, I already have my common denominator here, so that's going to stay the same. And I'm going to combine like terms. I have 1x minus 1x. Well, those cancel because there's a subtraction sign in there. Then I have 2 minus nothing, so 2 minus nothing is 2. Again, I can't factor the numerator there, so I'm going to leave that, and that is my final answer. For C here, I can factor this. They're the same already, but all I have to do is factor to see what my restriction will be. So 4 can't equal 0, well that doesn't matter. X minus 6 can't equal 0, so I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So my restriction is x can't equal negative or positive 6. Okay. Now my denominator is going to stay the same, and those were both already the same. I'm just going to use the factored form because I like to keep everything simplified. And I'm going to combine like terms. So I have 1x plus 1x gives me 2x. I have 6 plus negative 4, which gives me 2. Now when I look at this, I notice that I can simplify the numerator. I can take out a 2. So I end up with 2 times x plus 1 on the top, and 4 times x minus 6 on the bottom. This is where it's really important to know how to simplify fractions, because what does 2/4 reduce to? 2 over 4 should simplify to give you 1/2. So I actually have a 1/2, and then I still have x plus 1 on top and x minus 6 on the bottom. You can put the 1 up there. I won't do it, but this is the same thing. Okay. Last one on this page. Same idea. Same denominators already, so I'm just going to go ahead and factor them. I have an x factor there, so I have 6 on top, 7 on bottom, so I have 1 and 6. So I have n plus 1 times n plus 6, and it's the same for both of those, so I don't need to factor twice, unless you really want to check your work. So I'm going to find my restrictions. So n cannot be -1 or -6. Now, I'm going to go ahead, since they already have common denominators, I'm going to bring that down, n plus 1 times n plus 6, and combine my like terms. So I have 2n minus 1n. So 2n minus 1n is 1n. And then I also technically have a 0 here. So 0 minus -2. Well, minus -2 actually makes that a +2. One thing I'll tell students to do is instead of worrying about the subtraction sign there, I'll tell them to make this a plus and then change their signs up here. So really you're doing 2 plus -1, which gives you 1, and 0 plus 2, which is 2. I can't factor this at all, so this is my final answer. Okay, now here's where it gets a little bit trickier. Notice that these are factored, but they're not the same. What I'm going to do is find my restrictions first. That one doesn't matter, so my first restriction is going to be 1/2. So n cannot be 1/2. The other one can't solve it, so I have to do it. And then I'm going to find my LCM. Okay, I like to write my LCM off to the side here. Apologize for the bonding. If there's a plus or minus sign there, that whole group has to stay together. So I have to have a 2n minus 1. And then I also have to have a 2. Okay, so what I'm going to do to find my common denominator is if I need this in both of those, I'm going to multiply each fraction by the missing part. So the first fraction has the 2n minus 1. So it has this part, but it's missing the 2. So I'm going to multiply by 2 and 2. Okay. The second fraction has the 2, but is missing the 2n minus 1. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and simplify that. So I get 4 over 2 times 2n minus 1. I'm not going to multiply that part. And then that's a minus there. So I'm going to make that a minus sign. And if I distribute this, I get 8n squared minus 4n over 2 times 2n minus 1. And I'm going to combine like terms. So notice, though, if I work my way across the top, I can't actually combine any of those together. So I'm just going to rewrite it, but this sign needs to be distributed to both parts. So that becomes a negative 8n squared plus 4n, and then I have a positive 4 in the front. That wasn't impacted by that. I'm going to factor, so I'm going to take out a negative 4. So I'm left with 2n squared minus n minus 1. And then I'm going to go ahead and factor further because I believe I can factor the inside using AC split. So if I take out a 2n, I'm left with n minus 1, the 1, left with n minus 1. Okay, so I end up with n minus 1 and 2n plus 1 on top. Let me go ahead and move this. Okay, so I end up with negative 4 times n minus 1 times 2n plus 1 over 2 times 2n minus 1. And the only thing I can simplify, because the 1's plus 1's minus there, is actually reducing this. So if I reduce that, my final answer is negative 2 times n minus 1, 2n plus 1, over 2n minus 1. Okay, and that took a ton of room, so I apologize for that. Here's my factoring. Okay, so here's my final answer there and my restrictions. All right, let's do another one. Okay, can't factor the denominators in the next one. I can find restrictions, so x plus 1 equals 0 and x equals 0. So if I solve that, my restrictions are -1 and 0. Okay, so there's my first part. My LCM has to have x plus 1 in it. That whole group has to stay together. And it also has to have just an x in it. So my LCM has both parts in there. In the first fraction, I'm missing x. Second fraction, I'm missing x plus 1. I'm going to go ahead and multiply those. So I get 2x over x times x plus 1 plus, I'm going to distribute, so I get 3x plus 3 over x times x plus 1. And now I can combine those together. So 2x plus 3x is 5x plus 3. And then I cannot factor this one, so I'm actually finished here. Okay, so my restrictions and my final answer, and that's it. Okay, that one wasn't quite as complicated.